Lord, as we've just sang, you are great, you are mighty, you are merciful, you are holy. God, and our prayer is, as we have acknowledged that you are present in this place, as we know and we've heard testimony that you are present in this place, Lord, help us to set our hearts and minds on you, that we would not ignore your presence, turn away from your presence, be distracted by the many other things going on in our lives or in our world. But Lord, at this time and in this place, we might keep our whole self fully here, fully engaged with you. And may it be so, we pray, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You guys can grab a seat, and in just a little bit, we're going to be in Exodus 16. So you can start looking there. But before we get there, I want to talk to you about something else. I want to talk to you about grumbling. You all laugh as though you're familiar with this idea. Here's what I think about when I think about grumbling. It's like parents when we come down in the morning and our kids discover that we don't have their favorite breakfast cereal, and we have an experience with grumbling. Or maybe your kids are a little older, right? Maybe they're in high school and they wake up in the morning and they find out that you forgot to wash their sports uniform for the meet or the game or the thing today. But let's be honest, they're high school students. They can wash their own uniforms. So even if you do encounter grumbling, you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you have promised your spouse. Maybe you've promised your husband or you've promised your wife that, oh, yeah, I'll do this errand before I come home. And then you get home and you inform your spouse that you didn't, in fact, do the errand. And maybe you would encounter grumbling. Or maybe your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your fiance, you promised them that you would meet them for dinner, and it's going to be very exciting, and you forget to text them and let them know that you're going to be late, and so you might encounter grumbling. Or possibly, I don't want to push the boundaries here too much, but possibly you might have been the one grumbling. I don't know. But possibly you might have been the one in any of those circumstances or others who's doing the grumbling. Now, here's what I mean by grumbling. I want to clarify a couple things up front. I'm not talking about, there's a problem and I'm frustrated by the problem, or I think it's bad that there's a problem and I want to fix it, or I'm critiquing or evaluating or doing healthy planning for what does. I'm not talking about any of that. See, because we can do appropriate evaluation or critique. We can get frustrated about things. We can even be upset and want to change things. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is when something does go wrong, I'm talking about that attitude that is more than just an attitude, but you know this if you've been in a room with somebody who's a grumbler. The attitude, it seeps out into the room, right? It has kind of this poisonous effect where the negative attitude doesn't just stick with me and I'm frustrated by what's going on, but rather it seeps out and it affects everybody around you. Grumbling is that toxic attitude. It's that negative approach to life. It's that thing when you're in the room with it, you find yourself feeling a little yucky, even though somebody else is the one doing the grumbling. And I just think that all of us, at some point in our lives, have probably been at fault for doing the grumbling, at fault for having that attitude, that negative attitude, at fault for kind of poisoning the environment we're in. And all of us have certainly also been in rooms with other people who have been grumbling and whose negative attitudes, whose toxic approach to life kind of puts a damper on everything going on. And the reason I want to talk about grumbling and I want to bring it up right now is because in the Exodus story where we're at right now, the Israelites are about to go through a pretty dramatic change in their own attitude, and it has to do with grumbling. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to just stop and ask yourself, consider for a second. When was the last time you experienced grumbling? Where were you? Are you now seeing the world through your own eyes because the last time you experienced grumbling, it was coming out of your own mouth and it was your own attitude? Is it something you're encountering in a relationship right now? Maybe in the workplace, maybe in the home, maybe with some friends, and there's somebody else in your life and you're trying to figure out, how do I work through this grumbling that I'm experiencing in my life. Where was the last time you encountered grumbling? And as you think about that, I want to briefly review where we've been so far in this series. And actually, do we think we could? So let's let our great video, the Bible Project video, do the review for us.
And so every year since, the Israelites have reenacted that night to remember and to celebrate God's justice and his mercy. But Pharaoh, because of his pride and rebellion, he loses his own son. And he's compelled to finally let the Israelites go free. And so the Israelite slaves make their exodus from Egypt. But no sooner do they leave that Pharaoh changes his mind. And he gathers his army and chases after the Israelites for a final showdown. As the Israelites pass through the waters of the sea safely, Pharaoh charges towards his own destruction. The Exodus story concludes with the first song of praise in the Bible. It's called the Song of the Sea. And the final line declares that the Lord reigns as king. And then the song retells in poetry what the story of God's kingdom is all about. It's about how God is on a mission to confront evil in his world and to redeem those who are enslaved to evil. God is going to bring his people into the promised land where his divine presence will live among them. This story is what it looks like when God becomes king over his people. So after the Israelites sing their song, the story takes a sharp turn. The Israelites, they're trekking through the wilderness on their way to Mount Sinai, and they're hungry, they're thirsty, and they start criticizing Moses and God for even rescuing them. They say they long for the good old days in Egypt. I mean, it's crazy. So God graciously provides food and water for Israel in the wilderness, but these stories, they cast a dark shadow. And we begin to wonder, could it be that Israel's heart is just as hard as Pharaoh's? We shall see. But for now, that's the first half of the book of Exodus.
And so as you recall, the Exodus story started with God's people stuck in slavery, and we've been considering all along, just like God's people were stuck in slavery then, so also we in our lives, we can get stuck in our own forms of slavery today. We can get stuck financially or relationally or professionally. We can get stuck with the self-destructive thoughts in our heads or some destructive addictions and behaviors in our lives. And the thing that we know about the Israelites back then that I think is true about all of us as well is that wherever you're stuck is not where you want to stay. And so the Israelites, as they were stuck in slavery, they cried out to God and they said, God, would you free us? And in crying out, the Israelites made the critical choice. It's a necessary choice that is the beginning of any work of freedom. We explored how freedom always begins with a choice. And here's what we saw. The Israelites, part of the reason they'd been stuck in slavery, for 400 years they'd been stuck in slavery, but the text seems to say during those 400 years, they were worshiping the Egyptian gods. I mean, it's like they were looking to their slave drivers' gods to provide them freedom from their slavery. It's insane, except it's what so often all of us do. Wherever we're stuck, we look to all of the wrong places to find freedom, and we ignore all along the invitation God gives us to look to the one and only right place, which is him and the presence that brings freedom. And so if you weren't here last week, I'd really encourage you to go back and listen to last week's message, because last week was when we looked at the moment of the Exodus, when finally God's people had cried out for help. God had came down and demonstrated his presence in a powerful and merciful way. He'd presented to the world justice like it had never been seen before. And in that moment, God's people were finally freed from slavery. And we said to us as well, if you are stuck and you want to find freedom, will you make the same choice by turning to the God of the Exodus, who didn't simply stay the God of the Exodus, but said, you know what, I'm so committed to you and your freedom that I'm actually going to come down on earth in the form of a man named Jesus, who said, once and for all, I'm going to provide the means of all freedom from the very power of slavery itself, from the power of sin and death. And from this point on in the story, everything we're going to be talking about hinges on this one critical decision. Will you decide, like the Israelites, to turn away from all the wrong places and start looking only to God in Christ for your freedom? Because freedom always begins with a choice. Well, like the video said, the Israelites were freed from Egypt, freed from 400 years of slavery. And then as if that freedom wasn't dramatic and incredible enough, right after they leave Egypt, as we saw, Pharaoh has a change of heart. Pharaoh, who just said, okay, yeah, you guys can go. And actually, he says, you guys go. And would you ask your God to bless me? Because I kind of need some blessing as well. And then Pharaoh changes his mind instantly. And he assembles all of his troops and amasses what is probably, the Egyptian empire is probably the greatest military force of its time. And Pharaoh gets all charioted up and he heads out and starts chasing the Israelites. Now, the fear that the Israelites are feeling at this point can probably not be overemphasized, because I'm just betting that during their 400 years of slavery, they were not regularly conducting military exercises. They were not, regularly doing battle preparedness drills. No, they have been an enslaved and oppressed people for 400 years. They are not ready to fight. And so when Pharaoh and his army comes chasing after them, they are deathly afraid. And not only that, they get stuck again on the edge of the Red Sea. And yet, God frees them one more time. So not once, but twice, they've turned to God, and God has demonstrated his power in incredible ways to provide for the needs and give freedom to God's people. And then right after they cross the Red Sea, right after they've had not one, but two demonstrations of God's power and provision in their life, they stop and they worship God with this beautiful praise song. Go and read Exodus 15 sometime later this week. Just go and read Exodus 15, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine this is 3,500 years ago. Imagine you're in ancient Israel, 3,500 years ago. You're on the banks of the Red Sea. You're one of the Israelites, and you've just been freed yet again from certain death by this great God that you worship. Just put yourself in that place. Try to get yourself back there. Try to imagine like you still hear the sound of the waves on the sea and the hot, dry desert air around you. Get yourself in that place, and then go read Exodus 15 this week. It's great. Just go do that. So you're in that place. Exodus 15 is this praise song to God. And the very next verse, the very next thing that happens in the story is this. Then, meaning just after double freedom worship service on the side of the water, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days, they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah, which means bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" And then a few verses go by, and we get the same story again. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt, so some time has passed, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, to Moses and Aaron, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted." Oh, the good old days of Egypt. It was wonderful in Egypt. I loved living in Egypt. I wish I could go back to Egypt. I loved when they were whipping me and torturing me and killing my families, but at least I got to eat some meat in a pot. And then they look at Moses and Aaron, "But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Now, okay, let's cut them a little slack. I don't know if you've ever tried to live in the desert. I've done some desert backpacking. It's hard. Like, the desert is hot and it's dry and you get thirsty and your throat starts to clench up when you're really thirsty. So their circumstances were pretty bad. But the fact of the matter is, their toxic attitude of grumbling cannot be attributed just to their circumstances. And here's how I know that. And actually, this is how you know that too, because you know everything I'm about to say. I've met a lot of different kinds of people in my life. You've met a lot of different kinds of people too. Let me give you 4 categories of some types of people that I've met. I've met some very, very wealthy people. They have all the food they could possibly eat, all the water and all the beverage they could possibly drink. They have all the cars they could possibly drive. Some of them have more cars than they could possibly drive. They have all the houses they could possibly want. and they're miserable, discontent grumblers. I've met some of these people. You've met some of these people. The fact that they have everything they could possibly need is irrelevant. They're still miserable, discontent, and grumbling. Then I've met some other really wealthy people. And they have all the food they can eat and all the water they can drink and all the cars they can drive and all the houses they can live on. They have more than they could possibly need. And they live with a sense of deep satisfaction and contentment. And so what that says to me, and I bet you've known these people and it says to you as well, having everything you need does not therefore mean you're content and satisfied in life. And then there's a couple other categories of people I've met, and I bet you've met them too. I've met some people who are struggling. They're working hard, but they know how to do math, and the numbers just don't add up, and they're struggling to pay their bills, or maybe they're struggling to feed their kids. And maybe understandably, with all of that difficulty, they're pretty miserable and suffering in that hard place. But then I've met some other people that I think you've met too, who also they don't have enough money, they can't feed their kids, the numbers don't add up, and yet in spite of the fact that they have nothing, they live with deep contentment and satisfaction. And so my experience says to me that just because the Israelites were in the desert and they were thirsty and hungry, that can't be the reason that their attitudes just got so poisoned and they started grumbling against Moses and Aaron. That's not the reason. And as a matter of fact, the text says that's not the reason either, because the cause of grumbling, in fact, is not whether you have or don't have, is not whether there's enough or not enough, but the cause of grumbling, the cause of so many toxic attitudes, the cause for Israel, and I think the cause for us so often as well, is not whether or not you have enough, but it's comparison. As I've heard, actually, I don't remember where I first heard it, but a lot of people will say, there is no win in comparison. The only thing you get with comparison is discontentment. And it's amazing to look at how the Israelites were comparing, right? Because they literally just got freed twice, and they should still have adrenaline high, heart pumping. This is pretty incredible. 400 years of slavery, finally freedom. And what do they look at? They focus in oh, we don't have enough food. And they take that one thing, and then they reach back into their slavery, and they pick out one small part of their slavery, and they go, but there we had food. And they compare one small part of their circumstances with one small part of their past, and that causes them to grumble. And I think we see this in our own lives. We do this when we compare ourselves to others. We never look at another person and compare ourselves and go, oh, hold on. Let me make a sober and accurate adjustment of their entire life, considering all that's good in their life and all that's bad in their life, and then let me compare myself to them. No. We look at somebody who has one thing going better for them than for us, and we take that one part of their life off, sort of out of context, and we pick it out, and we hold it in our hand, and then we go find somebody else who has something else going on. Like this person, man, they've just got a great family, so I'm going to grab the great family life. And then this person over here, their finances are in order, so I'm going to grab their finances. I don't care what's going on with their family, and I'm going to mix it with here. And then this person has a great job career, so I'm going to grab their great job career. I don't know if they're making any money. I don't know if they're happy or not, but I'm going to pick that. I'm going to put them all together, and I'm going to compare myself to this fiction, this non-real person. You know what happens when we actually pick different parts of different people's lives and put them together? You know what we call that? Frankenstein. That's what we call it. It's a monster, it's not real, and it doesn't exist. So the cause of grumbling is not whether or not we have enough. It's comparison. And here's the really challenging part, I think. Because if that's true for Israel and it's true for us, here's what it challenges us to consider is grumbling is always an outward expression of an inward reality. It's always the verbalization, the enactment of something that was already there. And that's particularly crucial for us to consider when we hear the grumbling coming out of our own mouths. It forces us to ask ourselves, what is it in my heart that is leading to these words coming out of my mouth? What is it in my heart that is leading to these actions I see myself taking in life? Jesus actually talked about this once, and these words that I'm going to put up on the screen in a second, these words, you don't have to be a Jesus follower for these words to be transformational. You don't have to believe in God. You don't have to believe any of this. I think if you take these words seriously, these words of Jesus, they can change the way you go about living your life and seeking contentment instead of giving in to dissatisfaction, seeking joy instead of being a grumbler. Here's what Jesus said. He said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So whatever you hear coming out of your mouth, whatever it is, you ever hear discontentment coming out of your mouth? You ever hear bitterness and anger coming out of your mouth? You ever hear those poisonous words, those toxic words coming out of your mouth? You know what that means? I just want us to acknowledge what I think we know to be true and stop ignoring it. But you know what that means is that inside of you, that bitterness or that anger or that grumbling or those poisonous words, it means they're already inside of you. And if we want to see change, if we want to be less of a grumbler and more content, if we want to be less poisonous with our words and more joyful, then we can't just change our behavior, but we have to change our attitudes. If for everybody that's been a parent or like has met other parents who have parented, or maybe you've seen a kid somewhere, you know, like if you've ever tried to parent or teach or be around a kid, if all you do is try to change their behavior, is try to change their actions, it's just not going to stick long. We know it when we look at kids. If I want them to consistently have different attitudes, actions, words, then what I really, really need to change is the attitudes inside their heart. Now, we see that in the lives of the Israelites, and we see this dramatic gate swing. And I just want to sort of put a point again on how radical of a change they went through, how quickly. So here's Exodus 15. They're on the banks of the Red Sea. They've just been freed a second time, and they're having a worship session on the water. And they say, the Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. He is God, and I will praise him. My Father's God, and I will exalt him. It's just this wonderful, glorious, you can feel the excitement. And then the very next verse is where they say, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. But the thing that it makes me do is it makes me recognize how often I also can swing so dramatically from gratitude, from thankfulness, from feeling blessed by God, from feeling provided for from God, to suddenly being discontent and frustrated and wondering, God, where are you? And then here's how chapter 16 ends. Moses and Aaron, they've heard all this grumbling, they've heard all these complaining. And the Israelites, the text says, are complaining, they're grumbling to Moses and Aaron, but here's what Moses and Aaron, they say to all the Israelites. They say, in the evening, you will know that it was the Lord who brought you up out of Egypt. And in the morning, you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? Moses also said, you will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. And that sentence right there, that sentence is challenging, because what it says is, for those of us who, like we said last week or at different points in our life, for those of us who have said, God, I am going to trust you. I've seen what I do when I take my life into my own hands, right? I've seen the mess that I can make for my own life. So God, I'm going to stop looking to myself. I'm going to stop trying to worry my way into freedom. I'm going to stop trying to work my way into freedom. I'm going to stop trying to compare my way into freedom. I'm going to stop looking in all the wrong places. And God, I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to look to you, and I'm going to look to you alone. For that person who has put our trust fully in God, when we find ourselves grumbling, the challenge that Moses and Aaron gives to the Israelites is, you are not just grumbling against the person at work. You're not just grumbling against whether or not you have enough. You're not just grumbling about circumstances. You're ultimately grumbling. Your toxic attitude is ultimately your decision to turn away from trust in God. And so what do we do with that? We said the cause of grumbling is comparison. There's no win in comparison. It just breeds discontentment. But the cure for grumbling is exactly what we saw the Israelites doing on the banks of the Red Sea. The cure for grumbling is gratitude. Because that is actually the similarity you see between all people who are living with a life of more contentment. The similarity is not having more or having less. The similarity is not whether or not you've been provided for or not. The similarity is when you look around at your life and you say, God, what do I have in my life? The similarity of content people, of joyful people, of people whose attitudes are not toxic, the similarity is they are grateful to God for what He has given. This is what we see all the time when people go and serve in the parts of the world who have so much less economic opportunity, so much less food and water available. And time again, people who are blessed in abundantly wealthy circumstances like we are go to other parts of the world and we're shocked because we say, oh my gosh, you have so much joy. And the joy doesn't come because of what they have or have not, because you can never get joy by having or not having. The joy comes because of their gratitude. So, how did this happen? What happened to them? They were just freed. They were on the banks. They were worshiping God. It was amazing what changed that ruined all of that gratitude. Here's how I read the story as I look at the Israelite people and consider what happened. Here's how I see it. At the moment of their freedom, right, so we imagine God comes down and the powerful work of the Passover demonstrates justice, demonstrates mercy, demonstrates power, frees God's people. And in that moment, God's people made a commitment. They put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost of their house and they said, I am committing myself to trusting in God. And yet that commitment came on the tail end of 400 years of slavery. That commitment to Yahweh came on the tail end of 400 years of looking in all the wrong places. And as we know, simply making one decision doesn't magically erase or unwind everything that came before it. I mean, if you've ever known somebody who struggles with an addiction, maybe you've known an alcoholic, and you know that, maybe as an alcoholic, they had generation after generation after generation of alcoholism in their family. When that person says, I'm going to make a commitment to be dry. And in the 12-step programs, the first step is always recognize you don't have what it takes yourself. There's a higher power you have to look to. They make that commitment to be dry. The fact that they made a commitment is a necessary first step, but it's not sufficient for that day forward. Rather, they need to take that commitment and they need to work it out over and over again over time. And the way that I sort of think about that is that's because trust in the story of the Israelites, trust in God, it's not a treasure. It's not something that once you say, oh, I trust God now, it's not something you simply like put up on a wall and go, oh, look at my trust. Look at how nice that is. It's not something you take and you lock away in a box and put it in the back of your cabinet and say, oh, I've got trust in a box in my closet. Good thing I've got it there. No. Trust, it's not a treasure. You don't put it on display or lock it in a box. It is a tool. It's something you have to use over and over and over again. And like any tool, trusting God requires your practice and preparation for using it so much more than simply commitment. Here's what I think might have happened to the Israelites. They said, okay, I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to be really committed to Him. And then they simply think they can go on with their life as it was. Otherwise, think about this. I think we fall into this trap in different ways, but just think about commitment for a second. Commitment can be important. Commitment can be but meaningful. But let's just evaluate this. Imagine you're at work, and your boss says to you, I've got a big project for you. And, if this project goes well, there could be a big promotion. And I really want you, super big project, millions of dollars on the line, big clients, super big project. I want you to do this. And you're like, all right, boss, I am super committed. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm super committed. And then a month later, the boss calls you back in and says, all right, give me an update. What's going on with the plan? How's the project going? Oh, well, don't worry, boss. I'm super committed. Yeah. I hear you're committed. What are you doing to get ready to make sure we land the account, the project goes well? Commitment is no substitute for practice and preparation. Or think about sports. Some of you might have heard this. Maybe some of you didn't. But yesterday was possibly the greatest day in the recent generation of all sports, period. Because, see, about 5 to 10 years ago, marathoners, the sane, normal people in the planet who run 26.2 miles, for the last decade or so, marathoners, the general consensus was there was a hard line of the speed of a marathon. And the consensus was nobody will ever run a marathon less than 2 hours in time, which, if you're wondering, is insanely fast. That's how fast that is. Yesterday, a man named Eliud Kipchoge, a Kenyan, who's the best marathoner in all of history, yesterday he ran a marathon in 1 hour, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds, which, if you're wondering, is 4 minutes and 34 seconds per mile. Now, imagine you're talking to Eliud 4 months ago when he announced that he was going to make this attempt to break 2 hours. Imagine you're talking to him and you're like, all right, Elliots, wow, you're incredibly talented. You have all the biological markers. You're just incredibly strong. What's your plan to run a 2-hour marathon? Oh, well, I'm very committed. We laugh because it's ridiculous. Commitment doesn't get us there. Practice, preparation, or as one author that was really informative in my life when I was in college, a guy named Richard Foster wrote a book called Celebration of Discipline. And the way Richard Foster says it is that the spiritual life, the Christian life, the life of following God, it's not about trying, it's about training. I can't just try harder to follow Jesus, just like Eliud cannot simply try harder to run a sub 2-hour marathon. You have to train if you're going to get it done. And we see this in every area of life. If you're going to parent your kids, you can't just try really hard to do it. You got to get with some other parents. You got to go out on date nights so you have the sanity to parent. You need to read books. You need to, have conversations with your spouse. In parenting, in work, in sports, in every area of life, we know making a commitment to something, putting your trust in something, setting a course of action, it's a necessary first step, but it's never sufficient for the whole journey, especially when, like the Israelites, the decision we made is a decision to change course after a long history of going in the wrong direction. Here's what one of the books I was reading about Exodus said. The Israelites were looking for 400 years in all the wrong places and worshiping all these false gods. And the author said, you cannot uproot false gods. You can't just sort of pull them out of the ground and throw them away and assume they're gone. I mean, try that with the weeds in your backyard. Oh, but I uprooted them all. They just come back. You cannot uproot false gods. You can only replace them. If in our lives we've been stuck, and wherever we're stuck, we've been looking in all the wrong places, and we finally said, okay, God, I'm going to stop looking in all the wrong places, and I'm going to start looking finally in the right place. That decision is the crucial first decision, but it's not enough, because what we need to do is then the ongoing work, the practice, the preparation, the training, to say, now I'm going to replace all of the ways I turned my life in the wrong direction. I'm going to replace those with purposeful choices to follow God. So here's my question to you in your life. Where are you grumbling? Where is it happening? Would you be willing right now to admit, and maybe nothing comes to mind right now, but maybe in the next week, maybe in the next month, you're going to be in a circumstance and you're going to hear some words come out of your mouth. And you're going to stop and go, oh man, those words just came out of my mouth. And if those words just came out of my mouth, that means there was probably something in my heart that precipitated it. And wherever that is, whatever you hear, whatever you notice, here's my invitation to you. Would you consider that is an indicator that in your heart, you are turning back away from God and saying, I'm going to trust in all the wrong things again. And let that be an invitation to say, in that moment, learn what it is to train yourself to turn away from those false gods again and again and again and turn back towards the one true God. And how do we do that? We can do it in a lot of ways, but here's 3 that we kind of see from the text. First, we do it with gratitude. The habit and the practice of gratitude, of stopping and looking around your life and saying, I'm not going to focus just on what's wrong, but I'm going to remind myself of what's good and what's been provided in my life. Gratitude is a way to train yourself to keep your heart and mind fixed on Christ. Or similar to gratitude is worship. Recognizing that the God of the Exodus who came in a human form, Jesus Christ, to provide us freedom, worshiping that God is an act of training myself to stay focused on God so that I might not fall back into grumbling. Or like Barbie, her example of her life and many of us in our lives as well, service. God doesn't just call us from slavery, he calls us for the purpose of serving others and stepping into service, of saying my life isn't about me, but it's about others. That is a way to train yourself to turn away from the grumbling, to not just uproot, but replace the false gods in our life. And we actually see this throughout the scripture. Paul, the Apostle Paul, the man who was trying to persecute Christians and murder them, but when he encountered the risen Christ, it so changed his life that he went from fighting against God to fully serving God with his whole life. One of the ways that he trained to follow God was instead of fighting against the church, he went out and started planting churches. And here's what Paul said to the church in Philippi. This is Philippians chapter 2. Paul said, "Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." He, in a sense, invites us to, when your life has been changed by Christ, put that new life to work, so that by putting it to work, you might replace the false gods. He continues, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purposes." How do I work out my salvation with fear and trembling, Paul? I do everything, I wonder where he got this, without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And when we live our lives this way, when we make the necessary first step of putting our trust in God, but then the necessary continue steps of working out that trust in God, what happens? He says, then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. We replace the false gods in our life by engaging in practices like gratitude, worship, and service. And we do that not to earn the freedom God has given us, not to prove that we deserve it, but rather to embrace and accept the freedom God has given. And we know we need to do the work of embracing it and accepting it because we know that we so often turn away again and again. I found a picture. And I liked it so much that on your way out, on the back table in the center, there's going to be a card with this picture on it. And I put on the back of it Paul's words to the Philippian church. And so here's my invitation to you. For everyone that's put their trust in Christ, who like the Israelites said, I know the one right place to look for my freedom, and that is in the God of freedom, Yahweh, and his son, Jesus Christ. For everyone who's done that, here's my invitation. When you find yourself with this type of an attitude, again, not meaning, if there's hard things and you need to critique or evaluate or do the hard work of figuring out how to solve problems, it's not that. I'm talking about that poisonous attitude that ruins your own heart and ruins the hearts around you. When you find yourself grumbling, would you remind yourself of the good work that God has done in your life and in the lives of those around you? And would you do the work, the practice, the preparation, the training necessary, the work of worship and gratitude and service? And would you do that work to get your eyes and your heart off of all the wrong things and all the wrong places and keep it fixed on the only source of freedom that you will find, your God? As the worship team comes up, would you guys pray with me? God, I acknowledge that too often in my own life, I look again to the wrong places when your free invitation, your free offer to look to you always stands. So God, I pray that you would help me and that you'd help us. That I pray that you would help us first identify those toxic attitudes that draw us away from you. Show us where we are at risk, God. And then second, God, I pray that in the weeks ahead, as we see the Israelites make this choice over and over and over, as we see the Israelites turn back away from you and respond to coming back to you, and turn back away from you and respond to coming back to you, God, I pray that the story of your work with those people might be the story of your work with us and this people, that we might become people who replace all the false gods in our life with gratitude, worship, and service to you. May it be so, we pray. Amen.